Hakyuke tutam nagi chitu Hakyuke kudam nagi Hakyuke sunanagima Hakyuke kudam nagi Hakyuke kudam dagiru Hakyuke sunanagina Hakyuke tudam dagi Drola pinche sangue ruparesho sangue chudan saki chanama chanchu patu tani kyapsuchi nagi chisangi sonangi drola pinche sangue rupa. In Buddha, Dharma and Sangha, I take refuge until enlightenment. With the practice of generosity and the other perfections, May I obtain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. Let's start from a principle that we all are born alone, we live alone, and we're going to die alone. Understood that no one can live our lives for us. Our experiences are no one else's. No one else can see us the way we see ourselves. But at the same time that we are born alone and we live alone and we die alone, during our lifetime we interact with others. And this interaction is extremely important. In this interaction we give, we receive, we exchange, we share. We're not beings that were made to be alone. From our birth, it's not natural, for humans to be abandoned by our children, by our parents. There are some animals, for example, that right from birth are separated from their parents, and that's normal for that life form. And they grow, and that's normal. For us, instead, it's not like that. From birth, if we were not taken care of by by our parents, and then a newborn would not survive. A newborn needs to be taken care of, needs to be educated. There's so many aspects of our being, much more than we're able to imagine, in my opinion, that are strongly influenced by the experience that we lived in our early childhood. So being a parent is a responsibility. There's a great responsibility. And I just, as a side note, in these first 6 years, the first 6 months of life, the first 3 years of life, and then the first 7 years of life. It said that in these periods we develop our emotional, we develop emotionally and our identity. So we have all had this. And to repeat it, we need to die and be reborn. But the point is that when we are very small, the interaction with others is extremely important. We're not beings. As human beings, we're constantly looking for interactions. We're looking for friends. We're looking for people who think like we do. We're looking for people to share our lives with. It's normal that in our lifetime we interact with others. Being alone and isolated is not natural. It goes against the current. So staying isolated could be torturous. It's in prison, for example. One of the punishments is solitary confinement. Why? Because for us, It's not easy to be without human contact or other contact, but for a very highly developed person, it's a favor, because a highly realized being has great richness inside. This makes me think of a story of a monk in the 60s. He was alone in the mountains meditating, this monk. I like this story a lot. And one day he was walking through the woods to get water, to get kindling wood, and he was taken by the Indian Secret Service. They thought that he was a Pakistani spy. He had been there for over a year, and it's said that when you do a long retreat, you don't cut your hair. So imagine that he had been out there for over a year without cutting his hair, without washing himself. He didn't speak any language that was understandable for them, and they brought him to the police station. I don't think they were very kind to him. And they tried to ask him questions, but he simply, he would answer in his Tibetan dialect. And he ended up staying there. And he says, he tells the story himself, and that he realized at a certain point that he found himself in a place that was protected from the elements, and where they would give him food twice a day. And he thought, oh, how lucky I am. I don't need to go look for food outside. I'm just have all the time and conditions to meditate. So I just can imagine the face of these soldiers who would walk by him, and there was this man who would spend 12, 14, 16 hours a day meditating. After 2 years, at a certain point, they said that they set him free, and they brought him outside. He spent his whole time meditating. He didn't learn the language. They brought him outside, and then he ran back inside. And they brought him back out, and then he just ran back in, and he sat down. And then they kept bringing him back and bringing him outside. And then at a certain point, they said, what should we do here? And so they decided to give him a place where he could stay, but he was also free to go. And he stayed there for another 2 years. And every day he was there meditating. After 2 more years, then he went back to his community, into this monastery in the north of India, which was in a place called Baksa, which was an prison of the English. Even Mahatma Gandhi had stayed there. So all the monks and the men who arrived from Tibet in India, as refugees, they were allowed to stay in Baksa to continue their spiritual life. Or if they wanted to work, they could go work on the roads or work in the army. And these were the choices that were given to the Tibetan refugees. So cultivate a life somehow. A man who was my cook in India for a long time, he had worked in the army, and there were about 10,000 who decided to stay and follow the religious life, and they received a minimum amount of support. So all the monasteries of Tibet, they were grouped up here in this place called Baksa. And he had his friends, his disciples, they had already done all the ceremonies for Bardo and for death. They went back to them. Where he was doing his retreat was quite dangerous. There were tigers, etc. They thought for sure he was dead. When he came back and they asked him where he was, and he said, I was there meditating. I found this place where they were just giving me a place to stay, and they were feeding me. So what happens is, for a person who has a process, a path, an inner, like a rich inner path, so, this meditation is not sitting and emptying the mind. I mean, there's a whole process. If we take the timetable of a person who's doing retreat, has a center, for example, we we supported we supported a monk who was very, very well prepared, and he did 5 years of retreat. Those of you who are helping the center, you're helping, also, or helped him. So if we looked at his program, what he did in those 5 years, I mean, it was from dawn to dawn. He just was constantly working. I mean, the things to meditate on, things to study, the mantras to recite. It was a very, very rich program. So he needed to stay another 2 years because he hadn't finished. All of this to say that if we have an inner richness, then we can be alone. And there are those who do this, who look for this. This also reminds me of a Western nun who spent 12 years in a cave in the mountains. It was a kind of cavern, a kind of cave in the mountains, and when she came back to the West, they asked her, but doing isn't like a solitary retreat, isn't that a way of running away from the world? And she said, actually, you need a lot of courage, because what we do daily, being so, when we're so taken and busy with our daily lives, we're running away from ourselves. And instead, when we're alone, not just for a week or, a year, 2 years, 3 years, without being with others, at a certain point you start to see the dissatisfactions that come up, and you can't project any of that onto anyone else. So you find yourself really there with yourself, and it's not at all easy. You need a lot of courage. So beyond this, so being alone, is learning how to be alone is something very important for all of us. But beyond this aside, we are, as human beings, we're made for sharing. We look for contact. What happens here, is that naturally, the influence of one person or another, they're extremely important. We have this need also to belong, this need to be understood. We have a need to have faith, to trust. We have this need to trust and be trusted. A feeling of a mutual love, a feeling of belonging. These are things that are important. And the same thing happens along the spiritual path. When Buddha transmitted this path at the beginning, at the very, very beginning, Lama Michel explained that he talked about the taking of refuge in the Dharma. The Dharma is understood as the spiritual path, the method that we use, our own spiritual practice. The Dharma is not just the teachings, but also our own spiritual practice. After a while, Buddha added also the taking of refuge in the Buddha, the one who transmits the Dharma, and the Sangha, the spiritual community. And this is transmitted through a metaphor, the metaphor of a hospital. Let's imagine for a minute what a hospital would be like if we, as a patient, we went to a hospital where there are no doctors. There's 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 a whole structure. There's medicine and there are nurses, but there are no doctors. What what do we do? What would we do in front of a pharmacy without knowing what to take? Nothing. There would also be the danger of taking the wrong things. It would be, the hospital without doctors would be chaos. Instead, let's imagine that the doctors are there, but there's no medicine. What can a doctor do without medicine? They can give lifestyle advice, but there's so many diseases that require medicine. So a hospital with medicine with doctors without medicine would also be chaos. Let's say we go back again to the same hospital, and this time there are doctors, there's medicine, but there are no nurses. What would a hospital be with doctors, with medicine, but without nurses? I don't know how many of you have already been in a hospital for work or as a patient or as accompanying someone there. I think it would be total chaos. And then there's also those who clean and who bring food, etc. I remember here in Verbania, I gifted one of these hearts to everyone, to the hospital workers, because that first wave of COVID, everyone was praising the doctors, and then and in that second wave, we made a donation to the hospital, and I also wanted to give to those who work in the hospital, not just the doctors and the nurses, but the ones who clean the hospitals, and also all those who work in the offices and do all the bureaucratic work. But when we talk about the Sangha, we make reference mostly to nurses, those who accompany, who give you the medicine. They help this healing process. Without them, it would be chaos, So many patients are very good at not taking care of themselves, and often we need someone nearby to remind them to follow the treatment. And before I close this, I just want to thank all of the healthcare professionals in general. Thank you to all of you who dedicate your lives to taking care of others, and we should all be very grateful. Similarly, it's described that who guides us spiritually is like a doctor. A doctor can't cure the sick person. The job of a good doctor is to give the right diagnosis, to take care of the patient and direct them towards the right treatment. They don't have the possibility of giving them a health, taking away their sickness. A doctor's job should be, I think it would be better to keep us healthy instead of curing us from sickness. Apparently in China, family doctors, general practitioners, they had in China was organized The school system in China is over 4,000 years old, and doctors, 3,000 years old, 3,000 years ago, and doctors were paid by the families when everyone was healthy. And as long as people were healthy, every month you would pay your doctor. And when you were sick, then you would stop paying the doctor. So what would the doctors do at the time? They would go from house to house, like from the changing seasons. For example, okay, winter's coming, don't eat this, you need to eat this other thing, be careful of this, don't do that, watch this habit, you shouldn't smoke anymore, be careful here, be careful that, because if you get sick, I'm not gonna earn money. So the job of a doctor was to protect and take care of the health of his patients and not treat a sickness. I would imagine today if doctors got paid when people were healthy. Do you think that as doctors they would create lobbies to prohibit certain products? I'm quite sure that they would. Things that are bad or harmful to our health. There would be some kind of campaign to ban these things, but this isn't the topic of today. So it's like a doctor. Our spiritual life is our spiritual life is to guide us. It gives us advice. Just like medicine should be taken, Dharma, the teachings, the methods should be practiced. So the spiritual guide, the master, should be seen as the doctor and the Dharma like the medicine. When we receive teachings, it's like receiving the prescription and it gives us the medicine. But what happens if we take all of that prescription and we don't go to the pharmacy? Or maybe we even go to the pharmacy and we get home and maybe we have there in the altar all of our medicine prescribed. And we just look at it and see how beautiful it is there on the altar. Shantideva said, receiving teachings and not putting them into practice is like receiving a medical prescription and just reading it without taking it. It's not enough to receive the prescription. We need to follow the advice. We need to change our lifestyle. We need to take the medicine. This, of course, assuming that the doctor has the right diagnosis. For myself, once I needed a doctor, I tried to talk to 2 or 3 doctors. The times I did need, luckily just very few times. So I talked to 3 doctors, and then until I find the doctor that I trust completely. And I learned that it's very important that once someone trusts someone, that they really do. Because if I trust you as a doctor, then I need to trust you. It's not that I take the medicine halfway, today yes, tomorrow no. Once I take, then I really I follow well. So, but before taking, I have my own process of knowing and trying and seeing how the doctor is, so that I can really truly trust the doctor. In the same way, along the spiritual process, along the spiritual path, it's said that before trusting a spiritual guide or a path, traditionally one should wait at least 12 years. Not like, okay, I met that master, okay, and now let's let 12 years pass. No, 12 years of contact. listening to teachings, having experiences, a kind of trial, like, can I really trust him or not? When one has the deep certainty that one can trust, that one follows with determination. Why? In our own nature, our tendency is to repeat the thoughts that we've already had. Once I read a study that said 99% or something like that. It was a very, very high number. It was like 90+% of our thoughts are repetitions of previous thoughts. And when I read that, I totally agreed. But I think that it was even low as a number. What happens when we don't interact with others? I mean, our tendency is just to keep repeating the same things. When does our mind open to new things? It's when we interact with someone new, and through that interaction, we can see things differently. So a spiritual guide, his job is to open our minds. And what I've seen up to now, one of the hardest things is teaching, helping someone open their minds to things that they hadn't seen before. This is hard for one simple reason. If I want to teach you something, or if you want to teach me something, the only tool that we have is what the other one already knows. If I want to teach something to any one of you, the only real tool that I have is the knowledge that you already have, the experiences that you already have. For example, as an example, speaking Tibetan, speaking Tibetan, speaking Tibetan, I explained it to you. I said it. Now, why? I imagine that most of you did not understand. Because I did not use the knowledge that you already had. I spoke in a language that you don't, a language that you don't speak. I spoke in Tibetan. I mean, I imagine that. I mean, I really explained it all. It talked about, the importance of love towards ourselves, towards others, correct view of reality. But what happened is that, when we need to communicate something to someone, the real tool that we have, the tools we have is the knowledge and the experiences that the person already has. These building blocks the building blocks to make new thoughts are the building blocks, the thoughts that we already, and the knowledge we already have. So I think it's wonderful, it's marvelous when someone is able to help me open my mind, help me see things in a different way. It's kind of magic. And as human beings, we have this marvelous quality that we're able to transmit knowledge from from one person to another, to in other forms of life. This happens too, but it's more instinctive. The mother transmits to the cubs something, or puppies, something that is more instinctive. Instead, we are sharing knowledge. It's incredible, because if we had to start from scratch every time, does it work? Does it not work? Trial and error. We would still be there with the rock trying, to break rocks. And instead, if I have an experience and through trial and error, I'm able to understand something, and at that point, I can transmit that experience to someone else, to one or more people, and then they put that into practice, they see the results, and they transmit it to others. And so we have this ability that is, I think, one of the most important as human beings, to transmit from generation to generation knowledge and accumulated experiences. It's something absolutely marvelous. And even along a spiritual path, we need to be guided. Otherwise, our tendency is just to repeat what we already know, which is, maybe it's right, maybe it's not. For this reason, when the graduated path to enlightenment is explained, it's said that the starting point is relying correctly on a spiritual guide, someone who can guide us correctly along the path. It doesn't necessarily have to be one person who guides us correctly. It could be many. When we look at Lama Tsongkhapa, for example, who you see here on my right with the yellow hat, he's the founder of this lineage, the tradition, the so-called Gelugpa tradition. Gelugpa means the tradition of the virtuous ones, or of virtue. It's interesting, and few people know that the Gelugpa tradition originally was called Galugpa, and because the monastery founded that Lama Tsongkhapa founded is Ganden. So the Ga means joy, the tradition of joy. And then in Tibetan, Galuk doesn't sound good, and so it became Geluk. So, which means the tradition of the virtue, but the original name was the tradition of joy. Lama Tsongkhapa himself, he had more than 100 masters that guided him. He received teachings from so many masters, and he took them all together as instruments to his own path. And in the end, many of his masters became his own disciples. But this aside, it's not that one needs to have just one person guiding him. In my life, I had the good luck, I have the good fortune even now, to have about 25 masters, and a master can be one who gave us one teaching, who guides us in one specific moment in our practice. If we look at the antique stories that are told to us, the Temple of Borobudur, for example, when there are these panels, we have the Sutra of the Lalita Vistara along the panels of Borobudur that talk about it's from the birth of Buddha to his enlightenment. So the first level, there's the Sutra of the Mahakarabhiganga that talks about the suffering of samsara and karma, and then the next level talks about the life of Buddha and how he was able to get out of suffering. And on the floor above, we have the Gandavyuha Sutra, that talks about a practitioner who was in samsara, in the middle of his suffering, who follows his path to reach enlightenment, but he meets 50 different masters, and there are 25 men and 25 women who then became his masters, to show us also that the spiritual path, a spiritual guide doesn't have to be a man. It goes way beyond being a man or being a woman. And some of these masters were formal masters, and others were so-called ordinary people, showing also very important aspects of the path. So when we're at the very beginning of our spiritual path, the fewer teachers we have, the better it is. Because our tendency is to take refuge in the person and not in the path. And we take refuge in the person and not in the path. What happens is that every person, everyone who guides us spiritually will have a different approach, and then maybe we can find some kind of inconsistencies that would create would create a block for us. Instead, when we're more developed, the more masters we have, the better it is. But the job of a spiritual guide is very similar to that of a doctor. It's not to cure. No, the job is to prescribe and to encourage. And we need to be guided so that we can follow these teachings. And in my lifetime, I can say without any doubt at all that the most important relationship that I have had, and I still have, is the relationship I have with my spiritual guides. It's not just about what I have learned, but it's a deep, deep relationship of trust. It's a deep relationship of love. This is what's at the basis. When we look for someone who guides us spiritually, in the Mahayana path, as we follow in Tibetan Buddhism, we need to find someone who has, at the very least, some qualities. And the qualities are, he needs to be someone who has good morality, this ability to avoid what is harmful and to do what is beneficial, to maintain his own commitments. He needs to be someone who has a good level of concentration and control of his own mind, someone who has wisdom, a good ability to discern, someone who has good knowledge of Buddhist teachings, given that that's the path we want to follow. He needs to be someone who has an ability to explain the teachings in a way that we can understand them. He needs to be someone who, at the very least, has more qualities than we do within the spiritual path. He needs to be someone who has good knowledge of this so-called correct view of reality and is able to explain it to us in a comprehensible way. It needs to be someone who doesn't measure and doesn't. There needs to be coherence between what he teaches and what he actually does. It needs to be someone who has love towards those he teaches and has the commitment to never abandon those who are following the path. These are some of the qualities that we should be looking for. I say all of this because I see that my job here is mostly to be at the service. I learned this with Lama Genshin, and my main job is to serve. It's not to be here, not to be someone important, but I put myself at the service of those who need, and those who are willing to follow this path. So the first time that that the first time Lama Gachin told me to impart, to give refuge, I thought, oh no, I'm too much at the beginning of the path. And he said, no, you need to do this. And then I realized that that in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. And so looking around, so given the path, the experience and the knowledge, I can say that I have a little bit more. I have a little bit more experience and knowledge than those around me, and I'm happy to share. It's it's happened. Yeah, it's happened that I found myself in places where my experience and knowledge was much more inferior, and that was wonderful. I had so much to learn. I remember being in Tashilhunpo, the monastery of Tashilhunpo, when I would go to get teachings from my master, and these were marvelous experiences. And then at one point my master said, "It's over." It was the last year I went to him. He said, everything I had to teach you, I've taught you. So now you need to teach and not come here anymore, because I've given you what I have to give you. It's up to you now to share. I thank you from the bottom of my heart, because I learned really much more by teaching than by studying myself, and I'm very grateful for this. When we need to, when we share, it's one of the best ways to learn. So I feel that I'm in a position to represent a lineage, to represent a path. As I explained before, we have this ability to transmit experiences and knowledge from generation to generation. And what I can explain to you is what my masters gave to me, and what they had received from their masters, and their masters had received from their masters, adapted to your needs. But I'm just a bridge to share. So in this moment, so now we're talking about the refuge, taking a refuge. At the basis of taking refuge, there's a deep relationship of love and trust that needs to be created, that is created. Sometimes it's created quickly, like a love at first sight, or it can be the kind of love that happens gradually. Maybe someone feels the love and the trust, not just from who is guiding, but this love and trust towards the path, towards the lineage, and this can happen. It can happen right away, like love at first sight, or it can happen gradually too. But I'm going to repeat, it's not technical trust. Like when I need to learn something from someone, or if I need to go to a doctor, in my way of being, or if I want to go to a doctor, someone whose help I need, before looking at the it's important for me that person gives importance to my needs, even before looking at his qualifications, professional qualifications. I need my. If I'm looking for a doctor, he needs to care about my well-being. So for me personally speaking, a starting point for any kind of relationship where I need help, the person on the other side needs to care about me. And then we look at this, his abilities and qualifications. So here, when I'm talking about trust, it's not a trust of like I trust you. You will always tell me the truth. No, here It's, I trust you. I am sure that anything that you will do, it will be with the intention, you will give priority to my well-being. I trust you because I think you will always take my well-being into consideration as a priority. This is the concept of trust that's based on a profound feeling of love. It's not a taking of refuge where, oh, I need someone who, I need someone to teach me the theory of this, and you know the theory, and so we have this exchange. No, this goes way beyond, and it's something that's cultivated over time. It's a deep relationship. I try to put into words what goes beyond words. When we take refuge and you create this relationship, you're also creating a beautiful relationship with all of those who are also taking refuge. It's, with this spiritual family. I've had many, many beautiful experiences, personal experiences, and then also other people's experiences. I tell this story all the time. For a couple of years ago, I was studying in Tibet, and then I went to find Lama Ganchen, and coming back, before going where Lama Ganchen was, a couple days before, I went to a sacred mountain. I did a pilgrimage to the mountain of Samantabhadra near Chengdu, and there were a few people from Italy who were there, and there were also some monks from Tashilhunpo who came as well, and it was really beautiful. I looked on the map, and I thought, it said 14 kilometers on the map. I thought, okay, we can do this on foot. I didn't check that it was 14 kilometers, just straight up. But we did it. We managed. Anyway, the most beautiful thing was that for both the monks of Tibet, who had spent their entire lives in the monastery of Tashilhunpo, where it's very traditional, extremely disciplined, and then also for our friends from Italy, the monks were also saying, from these people with, the monks said that they had these great feelings of affection, as if they were family members. It's like when you meet a long-distance cousin, there's this feeling of affection, and this happens also among our spiritual community. I hope that when we'll be able to travel with a little bit more normalcy, Lama Ganchen always gave a tremendous amount of importance to traveling and pilgrimages and going to find our long-distance cousins, not just because these are marvelous places, but because of these connections that we create. So I'm trying to put into words that which goes beyond words. So the taking of refuge, which we're going to do now, is a moment where we're going to formalize our commitment to following this path together. In this moment, I take the commitment to guide you, to share the path with you, the path that I received. And to the best of my abilities, I am far from being a Buddha, but I learned, I think, enough, and I mean, there's always room to grow, but I'm here to be at your service, and the most beautiful thing that I can offer is the Dharma. It's what I have to share with you, and it's the most beautiful thing that I have ever received. So from my side, there's this commitment of trust, there's a commitment of love, and commitment to guide you in the Dharma. And those of you who take refuge, you have the commitment to follow. There's no commitment to be the first of the class or to be different from who you are. There's the commitment to do your best to walk in this direction together. And it's the direction we were talking about this morning. Someone has said to me already before, I am not worthy enough to take refuge. I have such negative thoughts. There's an example. There's a story from the time of Buddha, which the story of Galama. He was a murderer, and he had a very strong trauma as a child. His parents had died, and at a certain point he was told, for you to save the souls of your parents, you need to kill 1,000 people as an offering. So he starts killing people, and every person he killed, he would cut off a finger, and he was making a necklace. And his name means necklace of fingers. And he was a ferocious murderer, and everyone was very afraid of him. No one was able to stop him. And one day Buddha was walking in the forest, and then Anguli Lama was walking in the forest, and he said, okay, he had already killed 999 people, and he said, okay, here's my last one. And it said that as he was following him, he would be running, and Buddha was just walking, and he couldn't catch him. He couldn't catch him, and at a certain point he was yelling, "Stop! Stop!" And Buddha turned around and said, "I am stopped. The one who's going round and round is you." Understood to mean that I have stopped this cycle of suffering. You're the one who's going round and round, and somehow Buddha was able to touch him deeply with love. He understood then what he had done was wrong, and it wasn't the right way to help his parents. He decided to change his life, and he became a disciple of the Buddha. And along his lifetime, he was able to reach the state of arhat before dying. He was able to go beyond his anger and reach a deep state of peace. This is an example in the Buddhist tradition to say that if Anguni Lamala was able to do it, then anyone can. Even in the spiritual community, at the time it was quite shocking, because, just imagine if we're sitting here and then the most ferocious murderer just comes in and is then part of the community. Instead, Buddha, he welcomed him like he did with everyone else. So we shouldn't have this idea like, I can't make it, or I'm a bad person, I'm never going to make it, I'm never going to do it, I have bad thoughts. No, what's necessary is trust, love, determination to practice together. I remember once there was someone who was very close to Lama Ganchen many, many years ago, who was just overwhelmed, and Lama Ganchen took him took him in like as a child, and he said years later, I didn't get close to Lama Ganchen because he taught me who knows what. I was close to Lama Ganchen because he was the first one who to give me unconditional love. The first trip to India in 89, in the bus, this person was way in the back and spent most of the trip smoking hashish and I don't know what. And Lama Ganchen never said, you can't do this or you shouldn't do this. He always just took him in, accepted him, and he just then it's someone who has changed and has done so much. It's a wonderful thing. So with this person who was just overwhelmed with drug abuse, and the hook was love and trust. So when we take refuge, at the base there's this feeling of trust and love, but it requires also trust and love towards ourselves. Because if I go to you, doctor, and I believe in your treatment, and I commit myself to following it, it means that I have trust in myself to heal. Because if I don't think that I can heal, why would I follow a healing treatment? At that point I say, well, I just wouldn't be able to make it. Instead, when we take a commitment to follow a path, it's not just love and path towards who is guiding us, but it's love and trust towards ourselves. That it's said that the same trust that we should have in Buddha Dharma and Sangha, we should have in ourselves. This is fundamental. As I said this morning, I am my own protector. I am my own enemy. But we need to be guided, not just on an intellectual level. And there's something more for us. Having a deep relationship of love and trust with someone that we can trust spiritually. This goes way beyond learning something technical. It's already so much, and when we're really open to taking refuge in the past, then we can find manifestations of the Guru everywhere. I have an experience that I repeat all the time that it really touched me. When we hear like ancient stories, we hear like that at some point the Guru or the Buddha manifested and made him understand. And very often the stories are a bit magical and mystic. I had a few years ago this experience, and I've told the story many times. I was on the beach, and at the beginning I wanted to have some coconut water, and I found someone who was selling it, and it was extraordinarily expensive. It was like 25 euros or something. I thought, okay, here I am. There's nowhere else to get one. I'm gonna take it. I'm gonna enjoy it to the fullest. And then I went to see a beach that was really remote, and so I walked really far, and then as I got to this remote beach that was far from everyone, there was nobody there, and there was this man who was selling coconuts, and I thought, oh, this is so strange. And then I thought, oh, you can imagine how much he's going to ask me now. And instead it was a very, very fair price. And I go there, and I find myself with this man. He was about 50 years old. He had very, very dark skin. He's a colored man. And we exchanged very few words. But when I found myself in front of him, he just really touched me. That emotion that moves me even today, every time I think about it, because with his presence, he was able to teach me something very important. He transmitted this state of humbleness with dignity. He was someone who transmitted a beautiful level of humility, but with incredible dignity too. And I was quite shocked. I remember I was there and I didn't really know what to say, and so I asked him his name, and he said Michel. And then it was not such a common name. I was surprised, and I thought, hey, maybe he just really touched me deeply. So it's an example of stories of emanations of gurus and Buddhas. And the point is, when we are open, we can find the guru everywhere. We can learn and be guided along the path in so many different contexts. But this requires humility. One needs to be open to learn, to know. Be open to being guided. In the history, there are stories where people knew they met their guru one time and then had great realizations, and then other stories where one was very, very close to one's guru, but without great realizations, because the point isn't the objective isn't just to be close to the guru, but is to practice. Because sometimes people think that if one is close to one's spiritual guide, it's a kind of bonus and that it would be enough. But instead, and I've seen this in many different contexts, in many different places, in the monastery, like who are the closest to the lamas, But we have this tendency to idealize and idealize that those who are the closest to the lama are spiritually developed, but our spiritual path and our level of growth doesn't depend on whether we live in Albagnano or if we live in Australia. It makes me think of it's Victoria. Maybe she's even watching us now. This doesn't determine our growth. It's how close we are to our heart and the daily effort we put into our practice, the sincerity that we have, this deep connection of love that we have. This is important. So now we're going to take refuge to formalize this commitment. Let me repeat, it's not something that you have to do formally. The refuge, taking refuge, is where one takes a formal, one takes the choice and makes the decision to become Buddhist. But it's not important for me. For me, it's not important to be Buddhist. What's important is to have a sincere path where we grow. Sometimes people ask me or say, I already have other masters. I have a path that I'm following. Can I also follow here? Sure. There are some traditions that say, no, you follow this or you don't follow, and you don't follow anything else. I mean, that's a choice, without any judgment. Lama Ganchen always transmitted, and I try to follow in the same way. I try to welcome each one, recognizing that every spiritual tradition should be lived as a tool for the same objective. Even when I've heard people go to Rinpoche saying, "Can I go to that teacher?" And Rinpoche, whether it was within the same tradition or not, he would always answer, yes, you go. And what you find beneficial, you follow. And what is not, then you just leave it. So one doesn't have to renounce to something else to be able to participate here. No, that's not part of us, how we do things here. Everyone is welcome. I've seen people who, like, I've seen many people that, like, through Buddhism, they were able to reinforce their faith in Christianity. I don't believe that Buddhism is better than Christianity or any other spiritual tradition. What's important is that we grow along this path, we increase our wisdom and love, and if we, whatever method we use. But as the great Master Tisha said, for example, the one represented here on my right with the red hat who brought Buddhism to Tibet the second time, and our lineage comes through Atisha. In one of his texts, Atisha said, respect deeply all traditions, all spiritual traditions, and follow with determination the one that you prefer. I think that we should respect every tradition. We are not in a position, and we should never put ourselves in a position to say that one tradition is better than another. But at the same time, if we make a soup or salad and we put everything inside, we can learn from different transitions, but we should follow one, because every tradition has its own coherence, its own path. If one already has a path of reference and wants to enrich it and learn something from Buddhism, wonderful, Or if one wants to follow Buddhism as the main path and then take enrich from others, that's fine too. I think this is important to talk about this because there is a path, there is a kind of a process, a path to follow that is coherent. Now, before, up to a short time ago, when in the past when people asked me to take refuge, I would always say yes, but it would be more private, because it's something very private, something very deep. It's not a kind of public event. It's based on one's own choice, but because today we have very little time, teaching, taking care of various projects and administrative things, and everything I have to do, the material time I have available is very little. But then at that point I decided, okay, once a month we will have a refuge ceremony, because otherwise, people need to wait 6 months, I mean, and then when I say yes, it's a yes, but there's so many other things to do, I just didn't have space in my calendar, so I said, okay, we do it once a month. But and here one can renew the refuge that one has already taken. One can take refuge for the first time, or one cannot participate without actually taking this commitment. Maybe someone says, I trust, but I want to give more time to this, Maybe not 12 years, but a few months, some time. Give it some space, some time, and this is absolutely fine. I want to say this clearly, that no one has any kind of obligation to take refuge. This is a very deep personal choice. And if you take refuge or not, it doesn't make you more or less apart. You know, here, taking refuge is formalizing something that you have already inside of you. So now, when someone, now I'm going to try to be very quick here. The meaning of the word refuge is where we ask for help. I mean, we take refuge many times a day when we're hungry. We take refuge in food. When we're tired, we take refuge in the bed. When we're alone, we take refuge in a friend. We can take refuge in many, many things. And when you take refuge, there are two important points. What we're taking refuge from, and in what are we taking refuge in. If I'm taking refuge, if I'm taking refuge from hunger, I don't take refuge in my guru. I take refuge in a restaurant. So when we go take refuge in the Dharma, what are we taking refuge from? And when we're taking refuge in Buddha Dharma and Sangha and the Guru that personifies Buddha Dharma and Sangha, we're taking refuge from the cycle of suffering and the mental defilements, this cycle of attachment and dissatisfaction and selfishness and ignorance and anger. That make us react. This cycle of samsara. It's not a place, samsara, but it's an inner cycle. So we're taking refuge from samsara, and we're taking refuge mostly in the Dharma. Dharma, not just the teachings, but their meditation techniques, our putting into practice of our spiritual path. And when we take refuge in the Guru and the Buddha that give us, concede the Dharma to us, and we take refuge in the Sangha as a spiritual community that guides us and helps us along the path. The refuge in the Sangha is much more important than we can understand, but we need experience for that. So at the beginning we give more attention to the Guru, and then we learn how to take refuge in the Dharma, and then we learn to take more refuge in the Sangha. But the real Dharma is refuge in the Dharma. We take refuge in the Dharma when we put into practice the teachings, when we sit to meditate. Now we're going to do this ceremony. For those of you who want to formalize or renew your refuge vows, we're going to do that now. When you take refuge, you also receive a name. Traditionally, it's given for several reasons. It represents a rebirth within a new spiritual family, which absolutely doesn't mean that you are turning your back on your own family. It means being reborn with new objectives. It means also being reborn with a family with whom you have a very strong link. It's a new identity where one has a deep commitment to perfect one's qualities to help others do the same. So this name is given. We shouldn't fixate too much on the name, but it generally represents the quality that we should work on to develop. But all the names are beautiful. I've I've never seen somebody's name that says, okay, no, that's a quality I don't need to develop. No, they're good for everyone. But maybe this is one that we need to give more attention to. It is your own name, but more than the name, it's about being part of the spiritual family, being reborn with this new objective. Many spiritual traditions, like in Christianity, for example, when you enter into like to become a Christian, for example, you need to be baptized. So this is kind of like this is a kind of baptism. It's what we call them. There's this abhisheka that we say in the Vajrayana tradition, where we use the water. It's kind of initiation. But here it's a way to generate a new identity, to be reborn. That's based on what we want for ourselves in this life and beyond. Taking refuge is a deep act of faith in oneself, an act of love, of faith in who guides us, in Dharma and in the Sangha, and mostly love and trust in ourselves. So now we're going to formalize the refuge. If you don't feel like it, there's absolutely no problem. You don't need to feel uncomfortable. Those of you who want to, there are some formalities, from the time of Buddha till now. So if you want to take refuge or renew your vows, you can stand up, and we do 3 prostrations. It's a sign of request and a sign of humility. You don't need to worry if you're doing them well. You put your hand on your forehead, at your throat, at your heart, and then you go down and you touch your head on the floor, and then you get up, and then you do the forehead, your throat, and your heart, and they go down and touching your forehead to the ground. You do that 3 times. After this is a way to make the request an act of humility. And traditionally, from the time of Buddha, one would sit with kneeling. So you keep your left knee up, and it's basically like sitting on your right leg. This is the right posture. If this is difficult for you, maybe you have pain in your knee or on your back, then you can sit in a chair. This is not so important. What's important is your inner attitude. And it's more comfortable if you have your foot behind and you sit on your leg. That's the correct position. I repeat, if you don't feel comfortable, I've heard people say, I wanted to take refuge, but I wasn't able to kneel. No, this should not be, an impediment to taking refuge. So now, this is what has been done since the time of Buddha, and we repeat it in the same way. So here now you visualize that above me, there's my Guru, my spiritual guide, Lama Michel Rinpoche. Above Lama Michel Rinpoche, there's his spiritual guide, Kyabchen Chichen Rinpoche, that we see here represented to my left. There's another image of him over there on the throne on my right, and above there are many, many masters getting to Lama Tsongkhapa, up to Buddha Shakyamuni. Around us, we see in the temple all of these images that go around. There's in the clouds in the sky are not just random, you know. Around us there are all the holy beings, all of the masters of the lineage, all of the beings who have reached enlightenment, the Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, Dakis, Dakinis, protectors, all these beings who have reached Buddhahood and who they are all here to accompany us and be our witnesses in this moment. They're here to rejoice for us. What's most important is that from the heart of Buddha Shakyamuni there are light, the rays of light that go from heart to heart, from his disciple to disciple, from Atish and Lama Tsongkhapa to then to Trijang Rinpoche. Right before him, there's Paponka Rinpoche, then Trijang Rinpoche, and Lama Kanchen Rinpoche, and then from Lama Kanchen Rinpoche, this flow of light comes to my heart. From my heart goes to each one of your hearts. In this moment, we concentrate as to why we're here. We ask Guru Buddha to concede refuge to us because we deeply want to get out of the cycle of suffering. We don't want to be taken anymore by selfishness, by ignorance, by anger, by attachments or jealousy or dissatisfaction. We deeply want to help every being get out of suffering. We see that the happiness of every being is as important to us as our own. But we know that if we don't develop our own qualities, we can't really help them. So you, Guru Buddha, who have already done it, who have followed this path, guide me so that I can do the same. I take refuge in the Guru who shows me the path, in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Dharma, which is the effective, the real refuge, and Sangha is my company along the path. I take refuge in the Buddha, the Buddha that I will one day become, my own potential. I take refuge in the Dharma, my own spiritual practice, my own daily practice. I take refuge in my own ability to help others. Sangha, that I will become. I take refuge in the Guru, who is the personification of Guru, Buddha, and Sangha. I take a deep commitment of trust and love so that we can follow together in this life and all future lives this path towards enlightenment. We ask with this refuge prayer for Guru Buddha to stay with us in every moment of our lives, at the time of our death, in our bardo, and in all our future lives. With this commitment, with this request, repeat 3 times after me. Repeat after me. Buddham Sharanam Gacchami. Dharmam Sharanam Gacchami. Sangham Sharanam Gacchami. Dutiyam Buddham Sharanam Gacchami. Dutiyam Dharmam Sharanam Gacchami. Dutiyam Sangham Sharanam Gacchami. Tritiyam Buddham Sharanam Gacchami. Tritiyam Dharmam Sharanam Gacchami. Tritiyam Sangham Sharanam Gacchami. Namo Gurubhye. Namo Buddhaya. Namo Dharmaya. Namo Sanghaya. Namo Gurubhye. Namo Buddhaya. Namo Dharmaya. Namo Sanghaya. Namo Gurubhye. Namo Buddhaya. Namo Dharmaya. Namo Sanghaya. Namo Triratnaya. Sangye Chana. Soge Chonamla, Chanchu Bardu, Danyi Kyapsuchi, Dagi Chinso, Kibe Sonangi, Drola Penchi, Sangye Druparasho. In the Buddha, Dharma and Sangha, I take refuge until enlightenment. With the practice of generosity, morality, patience, enthusiastic effort, concentration, and wisdom, may I obtain the state of Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. In Buddha, Dharma and Sangha, I take refuge until enlightenment. With the practice of generosity, morality, patience, enthusiastic effort, concentration, wisdom, may I obtain the state of Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. All Muni Muni, Maha Muni, Shakya Muni, Soha. All Muni Muni, Maha Muni, Shakya Muni, Soha. All Muni Muni, Maha Muni, Shakya Muni, Soha. Now, I'm going to ask you in Tibetan is tabino, and you should answer lekso. So this is the method, and we answer. This is where you take the actual commitment, and then I'll snap my fingers, and then that's when the refuge is formally taken. So I say I ask you tabino, and you answer lekso. This is the method. You answer excellent. Lekso. Now you can sit normally, and we'll do the refuge prayer together.
Mentre recitiamo i versi della presa di rifugio, visualizzate
As we recite refuge, we imagine that Buddha Shakyamuni dissolves into all of his disciples, all the way to Lama Michel Rinpoche, and then dissolves and sits joyously at my heart. And from my 5 chakras, light rays emanate into your 5 chakras. These multicolored chakras, white, red, blue, yellow, and green. And here we imagine that our body, speech, and mind, and our qualities, our qualities and actions are perfected and Sharanam gacchami, Dharmam sharanam gacchami, Sangham sharanam gacchami, Dudam sharanam gacchami, Dutiyam dharmam sharanam gacchami, Dutiyam sangham Titiyam Dharmam Sharanam Gacchami. Titiyam Sangham Sharanam Gacchami. Namo Buddhaya, Namo Dharmaya, Namo Sanghaya, Namo Gurubhye, Namo Namo Sangaya. Namo Gurubhye. Namo Buddhaya. Namo Dharmaya, Namo Sanghaya, Namo Triratnaya. Chanchu Bardu Nani Dagi Jinsu Gibet Sonamgi Drola Pinshir Sange Druparasho Sange Chudam Sogi Chunamla Chanchu Bardu Dani Kyapsuchi Nagi Jinso Kibet Sonahamgi Drola Penchir Sange Druparasho Achadam Sogi Chunala Chanchu Bardu Dani Kyapsuchi Dagi Jinso Kibet Sonangi Sange Druparasho. In the Buddha, Dharma and Sangha, I take refuge until enlightenment. With the practice of generosity and the other perfections, may I obtain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. Mahamuni Shakyamuni Mahamuni Shakya So in this moment, we visualize that at your heart is Guru Buddha, inseparable from all the masters of lineage, and an emanation of me goes to your goes to your crown and comes down. So, sorry, first visualize that Guru Buddha is at my heart and an emanation comes out from me, goes to your crown and follows through your central channel to your heart, sits and on top of a lotus flower. You experience a deep, deep sense of peace and love and joy. Padam Sawe Lama Rinpoche Nagir Jurapinata Shula Kachin Chimpo Chunte Chandam Nudrut Seturut Sua Padam Sawe Lama Rinpoche Nagi Nikaratante Deshuala Yadri Chimbote Jetsunte Chanchur Nipundatu Tembare Kyushu. Gutserapten shin nankatine chuchure gepatan lupsan tempetame satsumgi drove musetatu ne gyurchi niwakuntu yanalamada dreme chiki pela unchuchi sadanangi yete rapsune Oce chingi kopa nurdosho nimodele tsendele anime kuya delekshi nitsen tatu delebe concho sungi chingilo concho sungi nodrupso concho sungi dashish. At dawn or at dusk, at night or midday, may the three jewels grant us their blessings. May they help us to achieve all realizations and sprinkle the path of our lives with signs of auspiciousness. In this way, we conclude the refuge prayer.
preghiere che vengono citate, la traduzione che utilizziamo da tanti anni è una delle due possibili traduzioni.
So this translation is one of the two possible translations, but in Tibetan language, there's a little letter that determines so whether if that if the if the relationship is if it's possessive or if it's an action. This is a grammatical particle that determines when we say koncho sung gi, it's that gi, this particle. So there are two different ways to translate this prayer. We translate it normally, shows the action. May the three jewels do what they need to do so I obtain realizations. So may they help me for good auspicious. But then the other translation is with where this sa is missing. So we could say day or night. Can I have the blessings of Buddha Dharma and Sangha? This positive interaction. May I obtain realizations of Buddha Dharma and Sangha. May I become may I realize the state of Buddha Dharma and Sangha, and may there also be the auspiciousness of Buddha Dharma and Sangha. And here there's confusion. The difference here, may the three jewels sprinkle the path of our lives with good of auspiciousness. In Tibetan it's not written like signs of auspiciousness, but we have three jewels of auspiciousness. So I prefer the translation that says, may there be in our lives the auspiciousness of the presence of Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. What's the good the auspiciousness is actually the presence. It's having Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. I mean, having them present is auspicious. The problem with the problem I have with this translation and that we've been using for decades is that the feeling is that here in this prayer we have Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, and we ask them to do everything for us. I'd like to clarify this point. I mean, the auspiciousness here is the actual presence of Buddha in our lives, the presence of Dharma in our lives, the presence of Sangha in our lives. That is the auspiciousness that we are wishing for. I thank you all. And as Lama Ganchen often said, see you sometimes, see you every moment, see you sometimes, see you every moment. As I always believed, and I continue believed, that may our minds, we're close, and may we always follow in the same direction. We formalize the way that we want to direct our minds. Thank you very much. Those who have taken refuge for the first time, I ask you to come now, or if you need to leave, come now to take your name, or if you need to leave soon, you can come now. Thank you.